Hey there, welcome to LSAT Demon Daily. I'm Nathan Fox, one of the co-founders of LSATdemon.com and our weekly podcast, Thinking LSAT. With me today is Eric, who is a teacher with us at LSAT Demon. We have an email here. Oh, this is another one coming in from our Ask button.
Yeah, someone who just took a moment to very kindly point out a tip that they found helpful from one of your LR written explanations, Nate. They said, I'm surprised how often, or you wrote in your explanation, I'm surprised how often students get spooked by some technicality in the right answer and end up picking a totally indefensible garbage answer. Tip, don't do that. I think many of us who have been through the trials of LSAT study can sympathize with this this trap that we fall into sometimes.
I was
Our
just teaching a class right before this meeting. I was teaching my double black diamond LR class, and somebody didn't pick an answer. It happened to be it was a must be true question or a supported question, and it had a bit of really strong language in it. And somebody just like they got spooked by the fact that it used the word all. And so then because of that, they're eliminating that answer. And then they're picking some other answer that I swear to God, they're not even looking at it. They just
yeah,
pick, it's just like, I'm scared of what's coming at me, so I'm just going to jump out the window right behind me. And when people are reviewing, they're like, yeah, well, I didn't pick that answer because of XYZ. And you're like, okay, I'm glad you can see that. I'm glad you can see why that's wrong now. Now let's look at what you did pick, though, because you made another separate error over here, maybe lots of errors, to justify picking this answer. Because you had this one, like, sure, there was a quibble with what turned out to be the correct answer. And then you had no justification to pick this other answer.
yep.
Should we continue with the ask button?
Yeah, our Ask Button correspondent just continues and says, I often find the best answer, but there's one word that can possibly be interpreted another way, so I end up choosing another answer that I conclusively ruled out earlier. You know, they hit the little minus arrow to gray out the answer choice. It disappeared, and then they're
You
like,
gotta go
"Oh,
back
but
to it.
I don't know about the word positively, so I'm going to go back to the
Yeah,
previous one and unhide that one."
yeah.
I knew I did this without really thinking about it too much, but now that I'm reading actual words describing this behavior, I feel like I won't trick myself into picking wrong answers like that anymore. Awesome. So, yeah, thanks for writing that. Thanks for bringing up that thing. It's an important one to think about. I expect a lot of it probably has to do with worry about the clock. Like at a certain
Yeah,
point, you might feel yourself starting to go back and forth between answer choices, so you get freaked out and say, "Ah, I'm just going to pick this one."
yeah, people just kind of close their eyes and pick, it's like, well, I think I'm pretty sure it's this. And then they get a little bit of like imposter syndrome,
Mm,
or they just double talk themselves out of it for whatever reason. And it's like they just can't believe that that could be the right answer, even though it makes so much sense. And all they're really dismissing it on is some quibble that would not conclusively eliminate that answer. And then that's okay to be skeptical of it, but then what else are you going to pick? You have to have the same skepticism on that other answer. And yeah, like we say, a lot of times they just go pick that other answer without, it's just like, well, I know I want it to be B, but I'm not good enough at this test, so I'm going to pick D. And it turns out that D is like obviously wrong. And even when you're reviewing it with them, you're like, yeah, I don't know what I was thinking there. And it's probably just you weren't. You got spooked.
yeah.
So slow down a little bit, right? 5 more seconds to just reconfirm. No, I really can't pick any of these other answers. It's got to be this one, despite my quibble.
Yeah, and don't let yourself off the hook. Don't don't allow yourself to forget about those problems that you had with that other wrong answer if you eliminated it the first time through.
Yeah, one of them is right, like legally defensibly right, according to the Law School Admission Council. They really intend for one of these to have an interpretation that is 100% right. And so you've got to find that answer. You've got to get in the habit more of solving these questions instead of just trying to narrow it down and then like educated guess. That's really just not what this test is about. It's a test of detail orientation. So if you want the best success you can have on this test, you need to take the time to get all the way there. And there's two ways to get there. You could either love the right answer and have checked off the wrong ones, or you could really, really be sure that 4 wrong answers are wrong, in which case you might be able to pick an answer that you can't, if you can't conclusively eliminate it, but you can conclusively eliminate the other 4, then yeah, that's just the answer. So you got 2 ways of getting there. But I think people rely too much on, I'm going to narrow it down incompletely and then guess. And that's
Yeah.
tragic. You know what that actually reminds me of? This is a total tangent, but
Sure.
I've listened to poker players on podcasts before, and they say that one of the most useful things you can do is to study final table strategy. And that's really not something that people do normally, because they're like, well, if I play in a big tournament, what are my odds of making it to the final table? I got to get to the final table.
So final table strategy, you just mean study the strategy of the people who are best at poker.
No, study the strategy that you will use at the final table.
Oh, okay.
And that's because of the way the payouts are structured, that
I
you've
see.
got to pay real attention to, like, wait, if I get 1 more spot, it's worth this, but if I get 10 more spots, it's worth that.
Sure.
You've got to like do different analysis at the final table.
Gotcha.
And the payoff is so huge for doing it that even though it's like, well, that's not going to come up that often, it's a rare kind of a thing, but you should study it because it's so valuable when it does come up. The analogy that I'm trying to make here is that when you've narrowed it down to 2, that's like the final table. And it's not good enough to just pat yourself on the back and go, yep, I made it to the final table. That's one of these. Let me pick. Because that's either a 0 or a 1. Like, you don't get any value at all if you don't pick the right answer, right? So if you settle for a 50-50 between 2 answers at the very end, all you've done is turn a 1 in 5 shot into a 1 in 2 shot. You had a 20% chance of just randomly guessing it correct. If you eliminate correctly 3 answers, now you've got a 1 in 2 chance, 50% chance of getting it right from random guessing. But spending a little more time and attention there to make sure that you're actually solving the question is what turns that 0 into a 1. Like, when you solve
Hmm.
it, you get it right 100% of the time. And so it can be really, really valuable. Like, I don't care what your elapsed time is on the question. I don't care that, like, you think, well, I've made so much progress, I've narrowed it down to 2. Yeah, great. Let's narrow it down to 1. Let's make sure that
Hmm.
we're going to get this one right instead of getting it wrong. And I think that this is one of those things that people do where they've got a pretty good inkling that that's the right answer, but then I've already spent too much time, I got to hurry, and then they just punt at the last second.
Totally. I like that final table strategy. One final thing that comes to mind about this, getting spooked and ditching an answer because of a technicality.
Yeah.
If you find yourself doing that, make sure you're answering the right question. Make sure that you're actually answering the question that you should be.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think a lot of times these technicalities are only relevant if you're answering a different question from what the test is actually asking you. And how often does that happen? When you thought you were looking for something that you're looking for the wrong type of assumption, like necessary instead of a sufficient assumption, or you're looking for something, you're trying to find a sufficient assumption when really you only needed to strengthen. You didn't need to prove the
Yeah.
conclusion, just strengthen it. So
Yeah.
that's one thing I would look out for is just check in on, hey, am I actually answering the question that the test has asked
Yep.
me?
And
Because when you focus on that, sometimes these technicalities will
right.
disappear.
And you've got to do that with the answer that you're going to pick. You don't get, like, you were critical of another answer, you decided not to pick that answer. Okay, fine. I don't care about that answer anymore. I care about the answer that you're picking. Now, does that answer the question? Or does it have some major thing that's wrong with it? Like, it weakens when we're looking for a strengthener,
Hmm.
or like it just talks about some irrelevant shit, or it has whatever. There's like multiple reasons why answers can be wrong. And not just simply not answering the question or playing for the wrong team could be that. And so then it's like, well, no, I know I can't pick that. Okay, fine. Now what are you going to pick? And maybe you end up going back to that one that you were trying to rule out on some technicality and think it through a little bit more and go, oh, but there's this other interpretation of that that makes it correct. Well, if that's the only one you can say that for, then that's definitely the right answer.
Cool. Thanks for writing into the Ask button. Email daily@lsatdemon.com if you'd like to ask us a question or share some LSAT or law school admissions news. Thanks for listening.